So last week, after our tractor rally in London, James O'Brien decided to devote a whole hour of his show to...
But is it too soon to respond compassionately to the farming industry's request for sympathy over a plight brought about, in part, although not exclusively, by Brexit?
James's view, 60% of farmers voted Brexit. Goodness only knows where he got that piece of information from. I'm looking forward to finding out where he got it from.
And just because I love you really, a final word to Idiot's Corner. Yes, farmers in Europe are protesting as well about some issues, some of which are similar to the issues that are being protested about here. But if they weren't in the European Union, their situation would be even worse. So you can't say, oh, look, over there, people in the European Union are unhappy as well. It's a bit like saying if you've got two broken ankles, that person over there with one broken ankle proves that your broken ankles are not a consequence of you having fallen down the stairs. So that there it is. So just come on, I can only explain this so many times. There comes a point where you're choosing not to understand. Andrew's in Buntingford. That sounds like farming country, doesn't it? In Hertfordshire. Andrew, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James.
Hello.
I suppose I was listening to the programme. I thought I really have to respond to this as a farmer.
Go on.
Farmers in their droves voted for Brexit. I don't think, if you actually look at the voting intentions, they were that wildly different to the national population, the 52-48.
It was nearer 60. It was nearer 60 in favour and about 30 against. And they're not scientific figures, but and obviously a lot of people didn't bother voting at all. But they were higher than the national average.
The only piece of research which is available to analyse the farming vote was done by Harper Adams University. I will put a link in the text below. And largely, it actually shows that farmers voted, in fact, probably less than the national vote, especially given that most farmers are male and most of them are age 50 and above. And we all know that the male vote for Brexit was 55%, and the older they were, the more likely they were to vote Brexit. But the most absurd thing is that every farmer is different. Somebody who works on a farm might call themselves a farmer, but they don't own a farm. And then you might get somebody who is a tenant farmer, and then you might get somebody who is an actual landowner and farmer, or they might own some land and they might also be a tenant farmer as well. There's so many different types of farms that you could be involved in as well. This research is interesting, but more than anything, it shows that actually the biggest influence on the farming vote appears to be the constituency in which they lived, the area. And I know in this area, at James Gray's seat in North Wiltshire, that he took a lot of people in agriculture for a jolly to Westminster to persuade them to vote Brexit. So perhaps it was more to do with who the sitting MP was and whether they wanted to persuade their constituents to vote Brexit. But the other reason for doing the demos is that we actually want you to understand what is going on with your food. It's not necessarily about all farmers, it is about your food. And the other thing to consider is that since 2016, 8 years ago, many people have passed away. And not only that, many people have turned 18 and are now old enough to vote. And some of those people work in agriculture. But on top of this, the number of farmers in this country compared to everybody else is tiny. Even if every single farmer had voted Remain, it wouldn't have made any difference. And then some people say to me, but it was all those banners. It made all the difference having all of those banners everywhere because the farmers are influential. Well, the research from Harper Adams University shows the highest vote for Brexit was in Scotland at 67%. And that clearly didn't have an influence because the highest vote for Remain was in Scotland. So actually, the farming vote was in fact irrelevant. The only thing that was about farming was that, and James did point this out, was that the Leave side, the Leave campaign, decided to make food, farming, fishing at the centre of their campaign. And the Remain campaign didn't do anything with it. There were no Remain boards or any campaign. None of the campaign came to farms. Why not? We don't know, because the biggest thing that's impacted by Brexit is food. And it's the only commodity which we all need, apart from water. And, you know, as we know, water is the other thing that's been impacted because of all the sewage that's piling into our rivers since Brexit.
Okay, well, I was one of the farmers that voted to remain. I don't mind saying that, and I'm proud of that.
Why would you? Why would you?
Well, exactly. I mean, you know, in a world that was difficult enough, why would you vote to make it more difficult? But my point is, I think in farmers' defence, the administration at the time, the government of the day, said, we will look after you. We will make sure that you are supported and the countryside, and you pretty much carry on as you were. Now, being a cynic, I never believed that for one moment, and so it has proved. But I think if you think back, James, very simply, we've had a whole generation of politicians that really have only had to be part of policy forming in Brussels. And they've been implementers rather than instigators, and you can debate the level at which we chose to engage with Europe. The point is, all of a sudden,
on stuff like CAP, certainly when Margaret Thatcher was in Downing Street, we were very much leaders rather than followers.
Well, absolutely, and if you recall back, we actually had the president of the European Commission, it was an Englishman, one Henry Plum.
Exactly that.
You know, we were passionate supporters of it, and I don't know really what changed. But it was never going to be. Our governments have got a track record of, you know, saying one thing and doing another, have they not? And it was never going to be the same on ag policy. There's too many other interests, too many competing land use requirements in the UK, a small country. So I have a lot of sympathy with those farmers. Would I have gone and protested? No.
Do you? But I mean, Jacob Rees-Mogg said the other day, and we have to be a little bit wary of still treating. I think one of the reasons why the country is such a mess is because people like him were treated with far more respect than they will ever deserve. But he actually said out loud the other day, anything that makes trade more difficult makes countries poorer. And he thought that coming out of the biggest single market in the world would somehow not involve making trade more difficult. The level of stupidity required to end up at that conclusion, and then 6 years, 7 years, 8 years later, to describe your own stupidity without recognising that you're describing your own stupidity, that's pond life level of stupidity. That's almost impossible to conceive levels of stupidity. That's Dunning-Kruger effect in real time. Farmers aren't stupid. How could farmers have thought that making it harder to essentially do their jobs would be good for their livelihoods? And normally, mate, people are queuing up to tell me that they don't trust politicians. And in fact, the kind of people that tell me they don't trust politicians would be a little bit closer to your community as a farmer, perhaps, than to mine. The people go, don't trust them for this. And so the defence can't be, well, they told us we'd be all right. Certainly not the people in charge didn't tell farmers they'd be all right. People like Farage and Rees-Mogg told them that they'd be all right, which is why I find it very hard to muster up much sympathy for them now, not unless they're contrite, not unless they're saying, sorry, we should never have voted for this, not unless they're going after the people that encourage them to do it, but they're not.
You could apply that to the greater population about sort of recognising a mistake. I think probably, though, as recently as 2019, when dear old Boris was in number 10, Boris said, you know, farmers, we've got your back, we will look after you. Now, you can say that was an even greater level of naivety, but you can only actually take things at face value.
I think you're just a bit more, probably because it's your mates that we're talking about, you're just more generous than I am. I can't believe in 2023, 2024 even, let's keep count at least, anybody would turn around and say, but Boris Johnson said we'd be all right. Actually, no, I had Minette Batters on the programme. I don't know if you heard it. And I said, are you really telling me that the entire future of the British farming industry depends upon you having faith in Boris Johnson's word? And she said yes. And look where we are now.
I can't but help agree, I'm afraid, James.
So finally, because I'm sure you've got things to do, how many of your Brexit voting compadres rue the day? And how many of them are blaming it on, I don't know, me and Gary Lineker?
I think if they're honest, they'll blame themselves. But I would have said if you had a vote today, you'd probably be a 75-25, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
I would. That's my guess.
No, I think I know it might be interesting to see what it would be, and specifically in your world as well. Andrew, thank you. So you speak to someone like Andrew, but he's a Remain voting farmer, and he makes you feel a little bit bad. But honestly, you expect me to feel sorry for the people who had the bloody great signs in their fields telling everyone to vote? Because you'd have thought farming would have been such a powerful lever for Remain. So look, I'm cross with David Cameron, who was pathetic. I'm cross with Jeremy Corbyn, who didn't turn up. But they left the field clear, if you pardon the pun, for the Farages and the Rees-Moggs, the Leadsomes and the Dorries to talk undiluted gibberish. And of course,
But farmers who are actually getting involved in campaigning are not doing this for compassion. They don't want you to feel sorry for them. And they really don't need to apologise to you. They just want you to know what is happening to the country's food security. Because without food security, if something awful happens, whether it's a disaster of some sort or a war, we need food security. We need to make sure that we have enough food for the country. And so they're really, really not looking for compassion. And the other thing is, if we do want to heal a country and we want to get beyond Brexit, we need to stop this tribalism, this tribal identity of, feeling angry and vengeful because of the way somebody voted. So please, let's just stop going on about what people voted 8 years ago, and let's think about what people are going to vote next time, because we can influence that vote.